and welcome to a video review from the Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. Today I'm giving my thoughts on Horizon Call of the Mountain, the 2023 PSVR2 exclusive. Just a quick plug though, if you like the content of this video, please go check out our full podcast wherever you listen to your pods by searching Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. We do 2 full episodes a week, plus a short quick take about some of your favorite games. It's truly an awesome experience and I invite you to go check it out. So, Horizon Call of the Mountain, why was this game made? Well, 2 very successful franchise games came out. The first one in 2017, the last one in 2022, being Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West. And after a very strong launch with these PS exclusives, especially Forbidden West, it was almost followed up immediately with this virtual reality title called Call of the Mountain. It can be inferred that Sony maybe just needed a flagship game to launch for the PSVR2, and kind of how they did with the PS4 Pro, where they highlighted all the HDR aspects of it and the awesome 4K abilities with Zero Dawn. Call of the Mountain kind of fit the bill as a good game to start off with for PSVR2. So let's compare Call of the Mountain to the other games in the franchise which are not VR titles. A lot of people know Aloy, the protagonist of those games. They know about the huge open world and the incredible combat and story focused on this post-apocalyptic, semi-dystopian future where you're kind of going back to just the basics of life. Do I need fire? Do I need to hunt things for food and things like that? And you explore this giant open world. That is really not this game. It doesn't have an open world. A lot of VR titles are more of a port from an original game. This is not the case here. It's definitely a VR built from the ground up, and you can see major differences in the game's focus versus other Horizon entries. It does not have nearly as clear of a focus on combat. There is combat in the game, but it's very different from what you're used to. You can tell that this was an entirely different entry, and they went with a completely different direction on it. It's more based on climbing and your ability to navigate this beautiful world. It has a lot more of a story focus. There is crafting involved in this game, but you don't use a whole lot of different weapons. It's mostly just focused on the bow. There's also no Aloy. I mean, Aloy's in the game, don't get me wrong. And this is not a spoiler review, by the way, so you won't get any spoilers from this, but there is no Aloy in the game. This is something they talked about pre-launch. Instead, you're playing a character named Reyes, who is not the focus-wearing Nora warrior that you're used to. You're actually starting out the game as an imprisoned Shadow Karja, and your brother's gone missing, and you escape early in the game during a prisoner transfer. You're essentially trying to clear your name and find your brother, as those 2 objectives go hand in hand. Instead of using the focus to look around like Aloy does for clues and paths and solving puzzles, you use what's called your instinct. I thought this was a clever way to get around the chosen one trope that Aloy has, because there's a reason she has the focus and she can see these things, because the world kind of revolves around her. In this one, you're more of a side character in this futuristic Earth. You're a person who's a skilled hunter and tracker, and you use your God-given talents to do all the instinct work in the game, which shows you where objectives are and that fun stuff. Let's talk about the combat for a second. It's definitely very simplified compared to Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. You don't have a plethora of weapons at your arsenal, and the fighting definitely focuses much more on the use of the bow. You're not really actively moving around in a full, anywhere you want to go environment. You're more strafing and dodging kind of on a set path. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's almost as though Reyes is on like a track, and he can go left or right in a circle to avoid enemy attacks and then use the bow to do offensive, damage. This being said, it is pretty cool that there's actual weight to the arrows, something that other games like Skyrim VR kind of lacked. You have to definitely account for distance a little bit. That being said, most of the stuff that you're fighting is a machine that's trying to gnarl your face off, so it's right in your face anyways. So there's not a lot of opportunity to really shoot something really far away unless you're trying to go for some of the extra achievements in the game, like hitting targets that are far off. One of the things that Horizon games have done really well in the combat piece is the ability to tear off different pieces of armor and weapon components from enemies, and this game still has that mechanic. It's very satisfying too, because you have to try and aim for weak spots and weak points as opposed to just aiming at a giant hitbox, which in the VR environment, when you're actually aiming the bow with like your left and right hand, it's totally different, and it's actually pretty well done because you have to actually learn how to use the bow as you go and learn how to aim properly. Outside the combat piece, the game does have puzzles, although they are very overly simplified. It's usually just climb down to a spot, grab a gear or something and place it in a door to open it, and then shoot something to hold the door open so you can grab what you need. The easiest way to really explain this would be like what you do with the Leviathan axe in God of War 2, when you freeze a gear and you throw the axe at it to kind of hold the gear in place. It's something like that. Really nothing to write home about. There is climbing, like I mentioned. Lots of climbing. A whole bunch of climbing. But where this game actually gets its bread and butter from is in the visuals. It is so incredible to see these machines that you've been fighting for, potentially 100 hours in the 2 previous entries to this franchise in this real 3D environment. You get a great scope of the scale, and it really complements the feel of the non-VR games. So if you play this game and you understand how huge these animals are by standing at the bottom and looking up, I think it would actually make you kind of feel the weight of these in the other games if you go back and play them later on. You can also play this game for sure without having played the other Horizon games because it really doesn't have any spoilers for those. So if you're just looking for a really interesting and different climbing simulator / bow simulator on the PSVR2, this game would probably fit the bill. Now, the world is lush and colorful, and you are offered breathtaking views as you climb to the top of certain peaks. Most people that play the Horizon games understand there's a lot of color in these games. There's a lot of different environments. You've got snow, desert, jungle, forest, and there's beautiful colors. This game has the same thing. It's definitely very, very loud as far as the environment. But obviously, as you're doing a lot of climbing to the tops and peaks, you also get a grand scale of height because it does get kind of scary when you're standing on top of a cliff. And you know that if you want to, you can fall right off. And I don't know, VR just kind of does that where it just feels so much more real. And so that's probably why they went with the climbing idea a whole bunch more. But the game is definitely very immersive. And let's talk about that immersion for a moment. VR games are best done with full immersion in mind. And this game does that well. Movement can basically be done by doing the running man in place. You press like the X and the circle button on each of the controllers on the PlayStation, and you just kind of run in place with your arms. Although you do have the choice to do this using the sticks, should that be your preference. Bows and arrows are stored over the shoulder, so if you want to pull out your bow, you hold your hand over your shoulder and essentially just grab it from behind your back. And arrows, it's the exact same thing. You have to grab your arrow from your quiver between each shot. And so it's really hyper-realistic. The immersion is definitely really well done. The health bar is not a health bar at all. You don't have a HUD in this game, which I thought was a nice touch. It's actually shown as you flip over your hand on the back of your hand. It's shown as these 5 green leaves. And however many leaves you have left on your hand is essentially how much health you have left. One of the cool things, too, is some of the enemy attacks, like when the Glint Hawks shoot their frozen breath at you, it will actually freeze your screen, like you have ice all over it to blur your vision, and you have to wipe your hand in front of your eyes to be able to see again. So really interesting immersion pieces in this game that, just really complement the idea of going into a virtual reality, again, making that reality as non-virtual and as close to reality as possible. This game definitely thought quite a bit about that. Crafting is also pretty cool. When you go and you actually want to make a new tool, you have a diagram on a table next to you, and you have to actually put and assemble different pieces together in a certain order. And it was really cool, too, because you have rope on a lot of your pieces, and you have to actually wind the rope around the piece and kind of go in and out of different holes. So you're truly using your hands to craft something, not just pushing the X button and holding it down on a crafting table like the other games were. So ultimately, I've given a few thoughts on what this game is, how it's set apart from the other games in the series. So my thoughts, though, is it really worth the $70 price tag? Because it is $70, and the game's about 7 hours long. To answer this, I think we have to look more than just at the price of the game. We have to look at the hardware. The PSVR2 is about half the price of the Valve Index, and everyone knows the Valve Index is arguably the best or second best VR headset that you can get right now in terms of quality. Well, the PSVR2 delivers similar and in some ways superior quality. So while the game costs a lot more, you could buy the PSVR2 and almost 7 of these VR flagship games for still just about the same price as the Valve Index. Now, you'd be limited to just PlayStation titles, but with Resident Evil franchise coming to PSVR2 and other plans for other games to come over, plus some ports, you're probably going to have a lot to choose from. They're doubling down pretty hard on this over the PSVR1. It's the new thing to do. They're putting a lot into it, and I think you're going to continue seeing a lot of great games coming on this inexpensive but great quality headset. So it's really up to you to decide, like, do you buy the cheaper headset with a more expensive game or go and spend $1,000 on a Valve Index to buy a $30 game? Well, that's up to you. I mean, I thought the game had some really great moments. Without getting into spoilers, again, there's an entire level where you're moving through runes and there's a Thunderjaw stalking you, and this leads to some pretty great mechanics that can truly only be appreciated in VR. As far as the game itself, overall, it definitely isn't nearly as robust as the other games in the series. Like I said, it's only 7 hours long. It really feels a little bit more like an expansion to the previous game, not a standalone feature. You do get to interact with Aloy, which is pretty amazing, because Aloy has this very genuine look to her when she's conversing with people. You see in her eyes this look of passion and caring, and it's really cool when you're part of the story. You're almost like an NPC in the other games where she's looking at you with that same look, and it's so cool to see the savior of the whole world talking to you like that. Overall, I did like this game very much. I think Half-Life Alyx is probably still the best example of what VR can do, but this one certainly was worth the play to me, and I would say that it's up there, probably my top 5 favorite VR games to play overall. I've linked the Multiplayer Gaming Podcast in the description of this video, and as always, please like this channel, sub it, do all the fun things that you do out in those YouTube's worlds. It'll really help us out. And until next time, everyone, happy gaming.